Okay, world hunger, the jig is up. We've been told that there's just not enough food to go round. It's an impossible problem. It's a scarcity problem. It's too big a problem. It's not our problem. It's not my problem. But what if we told you it's not an unsolvable problem at all? We have enough food on the planet to feed everyone that's hungry. Fact. Actually, we have more than enough. Bam, double fact. The real problem, well, we can't get it to the people who need it. Until now. Welcome to the first time in history that we have the technology to connect excess food with hungry mouths. The homeless, the poor, the kids on the street, Copia connects them all with the food you haven't used. I'm not talking soggy scraps and half-eaten pizza crusts. I'm talking the kind of food that feeds your Instagram feed. Quinoa salads, sourdough focaccias, and freshly made salads with those little cherry tomatoes. We serve amazing food because we believe in the people we're serving. Copia doesn't have a dream, we have a plan. One that works, one that you can be part of. Copia, there's more than enough.
Good afternoon. It's a huge honor to be here with some of the brightest innovators that the world has to offer. My name is Komal Ahmad, and as I begin, I'd love to see a show of hands. How many of you have attended a conference, a wedding, a lunch at Google, and wondered what happens to all of the leftover food? Yeah. Does the bride take it home? Does it magically disappear? Unfortunately, in most cases, it ends up in the trash. And I'm here to share how my team and I are changing that reality, and in the process, solving the world's dumbest problem: hunger. As a first-generation immigrant, my parents always used to remind me, Komal, don't throw away your food. People in Pakistan are starving. True and very well-intentioned. But through my work with Copia, I've realized that people are starving here too, in numbers far greater than any of us would expect. This is why I've spent the last 5 years solving the issues of hunger and food waste. From idealistic college student to CEO of my own tech company, I have encountered a lot of missteps, myths, and hot messes, including curry spilling all over the backseat of my car. And today, I'm going to debunk a few of those myths that have prevented us from solving this problem. Myth number 1, hunger is a developing world problem. I grew up thinking that hunger was a developing world problem. And it wasn't until a chance encounter with a homeless man in Berkeley that my whole understanding of this problem shifted. I was walking down Telegraph Avenue when I encountered him. He was begging for food, and something about him compelled me to stop and invite him to join me for lunch. During lunch, he sat across from me, just scarfing down his food. He was hungry. In between bites, he shared his story. His name was John. He had just come home from his second tour in Iraq. He had been waiting weeks for his benefits to kick in, and because they hadn't, John hadn't eaten in 3 days. Imagine 3 whole days without food. I was outraged. I couldn't believe that a veteran, someone who had given the most selfless sacrifice for our country, had returned home only to face yet another battle, that of hunger and homelessness. And then adding insult to injury, right across the street, we watched Berkeley's dining hall throw away thousands of pounds of perfectly edible food. And in that moment, I watched those who have excess food on one side of the street and those who were in need of that food starving on the other side. And it's this stark reality between excess and access that makes this one of the world's dumbest problems. How is it that in a world with so much talent and innovation, so much abundance, so many go without food? The truth is, hunger is everywhere. Hunger is prevalent not just in the poorest nations, but here in the United States, where 1 in 6 adults don't know where their next meal is coming from. And in the Bay Area, that number is even higher. It's 1 in 3. That's 1 in 3 veterans, women, children, right here in one of the wealthiest regions in the world. Myth number 2, you can't give away food because of liability. After my meeting with John, I marched right over to our dining hall, and I asked our dining hall managers, what do they do with their excess food? And they said, well, we try not to have much. And I was like, well, how often does that work out? And they're like, well, you know, and I persisted. and they finally admitted that, yeah, they do have leftover food, but they have to throw it away. And so I asked the obvious question, why would you throw it away when you could go right across the street and donate it to people in People's Park? They said because of liability, we don't do that, we're not allowed to. And I was like, yeah, because homeless people's high-powered attorneys are standing by just to sue you. And I was so frustrated with all the red tape that I was encountering, especially when I'm just trying to do a good thing, that I decided to do my own hard-hitting research. And I discovered the truth, and that is that you will not be held liable when you donate your excess food. In 1996, Congress passed the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act that protects all donors, regardless of whether you're a corporation, organization, or individual, from any liability. And in the last 20 years, the number of legal claims that have been filed against any entity or individual, 0. Myth number 3, hunger is a scarcity problem. Even though I knew that the dining hall was throwing away thousands of pounds of perfectly edible food, I still thought of hunger as a scarcity problem. We just didn't have enough to go around to feed everyone. Well, in fact, we throw away over 40% of the food that we produce in America. And let me be clear, I'm not talking about last night's leftover pad thai or this morning's half-eaten pastries, but 365 million pounds of perfectly edible food, enough to fill the world's largest football stadium to its absolute brim. So the truth is that hunger is not a scarcity problem. It's a logistics problem. Clearly, there's not a lack of food. The issue is that it's an inefficient distribution of that food. So after my conversation with John and the dining hall managers, I decided that I wanted to transform this reality. And I started with our dining hall. I started a student-powered food recovery movement. We covered food from our dining hall, our on-campus events, and our arenas, and then we redistributed it directly within our community to veterans organizations, homeless shelters, and after-school programs for underprivileged youth. Great start, still hugely inefficient. And it was such a simple idea and one that I'd completely fallen in love with, but like most of you who have ever fallen in love, you greatly underestimate how challenging it can actually be. And I vividly remember one day, and I was sitting in class, and our dining hall manager called me. He said, no one came to this event. We have 500 gourmet sandwiches left over. They need to be picked up in 2 hours, or we're going to throw them away. Awesome. Great. It's finally working. So I dash across campus, jump into a zip car, go through all the one-way streets to our loading dock, and begin to load this food into the trunk. This is perishable food, so it needs to move as quickly as possible. So I'm blasting the AC while I frantically call every nonprofit, every food bank, every food pantry that I could think of. Hey, do you need food? Hey, I got 500 sandwiches, can you use them? A third of them don't answer the phone. A third of them say, no, we're cool for today. Last third, yeah, we could take 10 sandwiches or 15 sandwiches. Awesome, now I have 475 sandwiches that I have to give away. And I'm sitting in the car, parked on the side of the road, thinking, why is it so hard to do a good thing? Why is it so hard to do the right thing? And where are all the people at that I can actually give this food to when I have food to give? And it was that frustration that led to my inspiration. I thought, how great and more effective and fluid this could be if those who have food could say, hey, we have food, and those who are in need of food were like, yeah, we could really use food, and we could match these two people and clear the marketplace. So myth number, so 500 sandwich, there you go. Myth number 4, nonprofits are the only solution. So nonprofits have been doing a really great job in this field, in the food recovery space. But they're also limited and they're also constrained, and most of them only want to operate in local markets. They don't have the budgets to expand, and they're not even thinking about growth or scale. And the truth is that solving hunger and food waste at scale requires capital and it requires technology. I understand that hunger is an age-old problem, but that's exactly what makes it a ripe candidate for disruption, a total revolution, a 21st century solution. Copia is that disruption. It is that revolution, and it is that 21st century solution. It's time that humanitarianism meet modern day technology. And by automating the process and centering it around technology, we're not recreating the wheel. We're revamping what exists to meet the needs of our generation. Here's how it works. Imagine you're Google, and you have food left over at the end of the day. Instead of throwing away, you would go onto our app, you would take a few photos, and it'll automatically geolocate you, and you send it to our virtual marketplace. On our back end, our algorithm will process that information, dispatch a food hero to go pick up that food, and it'll match that exact amount and type of food to the nearest nonprofits that can accept it at that day, at that time. As a full circle, we would send you photos and testimonials back, so you get to see the impact you made by spending less than 2 minutes using Copia. It's that simple, and it's a complete no-brainer. And that's also why businesses pay us to do this, because we provide them an easy way to effectively feed the hungry, reduce disposal costs, reduce over-purchasing costs in the future, and also get huge savings and tax deductions for food that they would have otherwise thrown away. Food businesses have an opportunity to drastically improve their operating margins by reducing this food waste. Today in America, we spend over $218 billion in growing, transporting, preparing, and then disposing of that food. $218 billion. And this is why we think technology is actually able to solve this, because we can use it to provide detailed analytics that help them reduce the surplus in the future, as well as automate their entire tax deductions for making the smart decision of using that food not to feed landfills, but to feed people instead. To date, we have recovered over 830,000 pounds of food and unlocked savings of $1.6 million for the businesses that we work with. We've never wasted a single pound of food, and I'm excited to share that we're on our way to feeding 1 million people, all with food that would have otherwise been wasted. So let me tell you one of our biggest success stories. This year, we partnered with the Super Bowl, which was here in our backyard, and our food recovery partnership with the NFL meant that we recovered over 14 tons of food from being wasted, and instead used it to feed over 23,000 people in just 2 days. And yeah, the Super Bowl happens once a year, but just the other week, organizers at a local tech conference requested a pickup through Copia. They were expecting 1,400 attendees, and we got there expecting just a few hundred pounds of food, just as they had said. And what we came to find instead was enough food left over to feed over 5,300 people. Imagine, that's one conference in one city in one day. Imagine how many conferences are happening globally today alone. Pardon my French, but that's a shit ton of food. And you can rest easy today, because today, our food heroes are recovering all of the surplus food from Meeting of the Minds and using it to feed hundreds in need here in Richmond. Myth number 5. You guys are a very awesome audience. Myth number 5, food waste and hunger are inevitable. We've all thrown away leftovers. We'll all continue to do that. There's going to be homeless people that are going to be begging on the streets. This is the way the world works. It's impossible to do anything to change it. The truth is, we've just never had the capital, the technology, or the gumption to do anything to fix it. And Copia's technology, its massive driver fleet, its convenience, and the benefits that we offer the businesses that we work with motivate them to becoming more socially responsible and also economically efficient than ever before. This is a no-brainer for businesses, period. Hunger is not a scarcity issue. It's a logistics issue. And knowing that, we now know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And when it comes to impossible, in the words of the late and great Muhammad Ali, impossible is just a word thrown around by small men who prefer to live in a world as it is, instead of using the power they have to challenge it, change it, improve it. Impossible is not a fact, it's an opinion. Impossible is temporary. Impossible is nothing. So I ask you, what do you deem impossible? Global warming? Solving the refugee crisis? Providing access to clean water? Whatever it is, there has never been a better time in human history than right now to solve these problems. And with technology, it's more possible than ever before. So today, I invite you to join us in ending the epidemic of hunger and food waste by connecting us to your company or businesses that you know that have or may have surplus food. I look at all of you beautiful, compassionate geniuses and know that together, we got this. It's time for us to remind the world that impossible is just another word. Thank you.
Thanks, Komal. Fantastic. Okay. Well, at Meeting the Minds, we're trying every year to reinvent the wheel. We always keep what's working, but we always adopt what we think you guys will benefit most from. And one of those things is more interaction.